All right, our next guest has been all over the Jimbo Fisher story and Texas A&M's future there on ESPN. Adam Rittenberg joining us here on Up to the Second. Adam, how you been, bud?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So I don't want to say were you surprised by the Jimbo firing, because I think anytime a coach doesn't live up to expectations, a firing does happen. But maybe surprised it happened when it happened.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those that I think you had to always be watching, but certainly the timing, came as a bit of a shock because it was such a big buyout. But here's the thing, and thinking about it more, and maybe we should have been in this mindset prior to the decision, that you look at the out years, the 2024, 2025, it wasn't like this thing was going to go down to $15 million. Like, it was going to be an expensive move whenever they decided to do it. And I think in college athletics, even though it's run in such a emotional and kind of wild, crazy way, one thing that's clear is that when you know it's not going to work, you can't keep going. You have to pivot. You have to change direction. And I think there was enough evidence, especially since the 2020 season, David, that once that it wasn't going to work with Jimbo, they weren't going to win a national championship. They weren't going to win an SEC title. And so at that point, I think I understand, even though it was incredibly expensive, historic in that sense, why they pivoted to, making the change that they did.
Adam, the funny part is, while I agreed with the initial contract, I did scratch my head at the extension, but it made sense at the time. Maybe not the extension itself, but the raise made sense to me. And I'm looking at these numbers, 2031. My sons are sophomores in high school. They'll be out of college when that contract was supposed to be done.
Yeah, I kind of joked it's like the Jim Bonilla contract. It's it's the Bobby Bonilla contract for football, and it's the most glaring example, but certainly not the only example of what happens when you emotionally spend. I mean, if you or I ran our personal expenses, or really like any of these folks, maybe they're rich enough that they can do this, but if we ran our personal expenses like donors run college athletics and departments, especially spending around coaches' salaries, we'd all be broke. I mean, it's just a crazy way to live your life. But this is what happens when you when you're driven by the emotion and the possibility of championships. And that certainly was motivating, and understandably so, for Texas A&M on the front end. I'm with you, probably less so on the second time around. In some ways, it's those extensions, not the initial contracts, that get schools in big trouble. And certainly was the case here for A&M with Jimbo. It was the case with Auburn, with Gus Malzahn. The idea of losing a coach, especially to a competitor in the SEC, in this case, it would have been LSU. In that case, it would have been Arkansas, is so painful for some folks that they'd rather just throw money at the problem, or at the potential problem, the situation, and deal with the consequences on the back end. And that's the typical pattern of behavior I've observed in covering college football and in covering the coaching carousel, is that there's just such a fear of what happens if this coach leaves us for another school in the SEC. How are we even going to wake up in the morning? The truth is, you'll be fine. And I think more of these coaches need greater self-esteem. Like, your program is still pretty great, regardless who the head coach is. They want to leave. That's their right. We will be okay. There's less of that thinking in my mind, David, because there's just such a fear of, oh my God, we lost our coach to fill in the blank.
Adam, I do want to go back to that for one quick second, because remembering what it felt like in 2021, August of 2021, A&M had come off that 2020 Orange Bowl season, and the fear of Jimbo going to LSU was real. And at that point, it felt like you're ascending. Unfortunately for A&M, they ascended, and then came that steep cliff.
They did, and it really was kind of a one-year deal. And what's so ironic about that was a season where it was an all-SEC schedule. And there certainly were some factors in 2020 that, were obviously different from many, many other seasons. But the fact is, that was a really good team that held its own in a very tough conference. And it was a deserving top 5 team that year. But they just never were able to harness that going forward. And despite the recruiting, despite the money, despite the NIL efforts, they weren't able to get back to that place, or really remotely back to that place. And so that's why they decided to make this move when they did, and reset, still with a lot of good players, still with a lot of the things that have made Texas A&M positioned to compete, even though they haven't for a long time. and they're going to try it with a new coach.
So who do you think that new coach might be? I know there's those wish lists out there, and I look at the Mississippi State wish list. Some of them seem to be some of the same names because there's only one huge opportunity right now. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out. What do you think? What do you think's the right fit for A&M that is realistic?
Right. I think it's somebody who really has a vision for roster building instead of just, it's tough in college football because sometimes when you have access to the best talent, then the knee jerk is just to grab whatever you can. And I think what happened at A&M was because they had that ability, they just grabbed the talent instead of thinking, does this person really fit here? Is this person going to work in our culture, make us a better program? So I think it's somebody who has that vision. I do think it will matter this time around, David, to have somebody a little bit more connected to the program. I know that hasn't been the case, in the past at times. Certainly wasn't the case with Jimbo. Really had not been in that state or around the Texas A&M program before he got the job. But the two names that jump to mind are not surprising in Mike Elko and Jeff Traylor, and that both of them would be, I think a lot more comfortable maybe walking in the door to that situation, especially for Mike. He'd been there. He did a good job as an A&M assistant defensive coordinator. He understands the place and the pressure and all of that. And then Jeff Traylor, I think, would just be a huge hit for that community. He's a guy who connects with people from Texas, anywhere in Texas, but especially East Texas. And then I don't think there's a college coach, even Mac Brown, who's more popular among the high school coaches in the state of Texas than Jeff Traylor does. Does that mean, you still have to recruit other places? You still have to be active in the transfer portal. But I think that A&M would have a real opportunity to be the top recruiting operation in the state of Texas if they went with somebody like that. Dan Lanning made it pretty clear last night he's not coming there. Certainly, there's other candidates that are notable, but one thing that works against A&M here, I think, especially when you're talking about Kalen DeBoer or even a Dabo Sweeney, I know he was asked about it today, is that you're asking coaches to leave programs that have proven to win championships and compete nationally much more recently than A&M has. So you're asking them to take that leap of faith, and you certainly can offer all the things that A&M can, and very few programs can do that. But you can't say, hey, listen, we can win here. Say, maybe we can win here. But he knows if you're Kalen DeBoer or Dan Lanning or Dabo Sweeney, you can win where you're at. You don't know for sure if you can win in College Station.
Adam, when I'm in the preseason thinking about scenarios out there, I thought, all right, Michigan's probably going to win the national championship. Jim Harbaugh is going to leave on a high note and go to the NFL because that's what I think he's wanted to do the last couple of years, right? That might still happen, but maybe for different reasons. So do you think Jim Harbaugh's at Michigan next year?
Well, if he wants to be, that's the thing people need to realize. Like, even if they get hit with horrible violations, Michigan has taken a position that Jim Harbaugh is their guy. Their president, Santaono, is the biggest Harbaugh fan on the campus probably right now. Fans want him there. The administration, I know there's been some friction, but they have gotten behind him amid all that's gone on here with the Big Ten suspension. And I think Jim Harbaugh loves this in a weird way. He's the type of guy that loves to have everybody against you. He probably loves the Michigan versus everybody shirts and beanies that the players are wearing now, and the fact that that they're rising above this controversy. So I think in some ways he's probably likelier to remain at Michigan than maybe he was when things were going great, because he certainly had an interest in getting back to the NFL. I don't think that interest has gone anywhere. But the thing that everyone needs to remember is the NFL team has to say yes. And there's other options in the NFL. There's other options in college football. And there's really not very many NFL jobs relative to college jobs every year. Maybe you get to 5 or 6. So if those people have candidates internal or coordinators or what have you, if they hire those guys, there's no room for Jim Harbaugh. So I think with the jobs that are likely to open this year, there's a pretty good chance. We already know there's one open in Vegas. Chargers, I think, will open. The Bears, I think, will open. All those are possibilities for Jim Harbaugh, but it doesn't mean he's going to get it. So I would still go with Michigan versus the NFL as the likelier destination for Harbaugh in 2024.
Adam, last thing for you. Georgia, Tennessee this weekend. Am I being a prisoner of the moment, or has Tennessee been a huge disappointment this year, considering I knew they weren't going to have Hendon Hooker? I didn't think they were going to have the success that they had last year. but I also didn't expect for Missouri to make the leap that they made.
Well, I think Missouri's really good. I mean, that's I think Missouri, and you could ask people at Georgia, Kirby Smart was very complimentary of them. I think they've taken a significant step. That was a program that was better defensively last year. They really moved in the right direction on that side of the ball. And then the quarterback play took a big jump this year with Brady Cook. The running back Schrader has been outstanding. Luther Burden is an All-America candidate at receiver. And I talked with Eli Drinkwitz a few days ago, and he said, those are guys that can change the game. And we didn't have that before. So, and their defense has continued to ascend. And certainly the performance last week was disappointing for Tennessee. And, a little bit of a reality check of where they're at right now. And if they were to struggle against Georgia, I think some of that early Josh Heupel buzz is going to die down a bit. But they did lose a lot of really good players. Let's just be real. I mean, they lost great players at quarterback, at receiver, offensive line. Their defense still isn't quite where they think they want it to be in the future. So I still think Josh Heupel is doing a heck of a job. But I also give Missouri a lot of credit. Right now, you could make a case, and I know LSU beat them, but you could say Missouri has an argument to be the third best team in the SEC, if not the fourth, right behind LSU.
Adam, appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.